So let's embrace it and make it as useful to our students as possible. Obviously, the main concern is maintaining academic integrity. At least that's where it was when I started. So the first thing that I did in class was to basically show students what AI does poorly. Um, it does a lot of things poorly. And the main thing I wanted to do is offer them the opportunity to use it as sort of an opportunity for research and brainstorming, to work on sort of basic mechanics. But I did want to point out the dangers of bad information, of AI hallucinations. So I made videos and I did searches for them, and I showed them comparisons that I thought were really effective. And the example I have that I thought was really a slam dunk was in presenting the short story Rashomon by Japanese writer Akutagawa. I had ChatGPT generate an essay on this story, and the essay it generated was actually about the film by Kurosawa. Now, film is based on writing by Akutagawa, but it doesn't happen to be the same story. So it was very visible to me. I went back in and I generated essay after essay trying to get this thing to write about the actual story, but it would not. Even when I specifically asked it to, it basically just gave me the content of the film and pretended that it was the writer's story. So it gave me misinformation and erased every path that I could have taken back to truth. And I thought this video was very effective. And I sent it out to my students, and essay time came around, and I got my papers, and they were all, AI generated. Well, not all of them. I had a significant amount of AI generation. So this didn't work. This information, and why would it, right? The details of some specific writer, writing 100 years ago. It's not tangible. It's not relevant. So my next experiment was to have them actually have ChatGPT generate essays for them. I had my students draft a couple of different versions of their theses and then put that into ChatGPT to see how their writing compared to the output of ChatGPT. Now, I thought that it would be incredibly visible. Students have been writing these essays, for a little while, but in fact, that's not what I experienced. Essay time came around and they submitted essays to me, and they were AI generated. Again, we still had this issue, and now it's my fault. I sent them to ChatGPT to generate these essays, and now how can I act surprised that it came back to me as generated? And what's worse is now, because I've asked them to do that, students in their self-evaluation were saying that ChatGPT helped them. And what I found is that students were so dazzled by the instantaneous output of this scholarly sounding writing that in many cases, students just adopted the deficient and weak theses that ChatGPT offered them instead of hanging on to their own and crafting them even further. So it completely backfired. And I had this realization that the reason they can't see this is because they're not necessarily fluent in the genre of academic writing. Students only write a handful of academic essays over the course of their career. But students do know stories. So now I've crafted a new assignment where students go to ChatGPT and they generate a story, a work of fiction using any prompt they want involving an AI becoming sentient in some way. And then they analyze it the same way that we analyze stories, every other story in class. I have them in the same week do the same thing to a human written story that's also sci-fi involving an AI becoming self-aware. Then I have them compare. All of a sudden, there's like this miraculous turn. Students are experts. They know stories. Because they're familiar with it, they're less intimidated about engaging with the material. They can all of a sudden see all the complex nuance in the writing. I eliminated that slide. Um, here I go again. Uh, the students were able to see where AI writing was significantly different than their own writing. They were able to see that it lacked concrete details, that it didn't have that it didn't have voice, that it didn't have much dialogue. It was basically disconnected from the experience that they had. And they evaluated it as bad writing. Conversely, they were able to see that the human written writing was a little more complex, that it was less efficient. And they had this moment of saying, well, why am I evaluating this human written um, writing as better when it is confusing? It's more complex. And students, because they already know the stories, are now, and because they're engaging with this in an authentic manner rather than top down, they can all of a sudden feel what it means to have language being complex in an intentional way in service of larger sort of communicative goals. And that's something that's really hard to explain to students and to demonstrate to them. Usually students want to see complex writing and they say, oh man, why do I have to read this? And it's a slog to get them through it. But feeling that really makes a big difference for them. And because they're emotionally driven, because they're intuition led, what ends up happening, by and large, is that students are able to perceive sort of bigger picture elements. And there's sort of an uncanniness about the AI writing that really resonates with them. And my students, in very large percentages, end up feeling that they find themselves intuitively questioning sort of their human nature and what is missing in this writing. And this leads us to bigger questions. Students say that, this makes them think about their humanity. So this ends up being the greatest sort of gift of this whole experience, which is I had started off by saying, hey, let's, just try to be ethical about writing. The essays are bad. And accidentally, through this little experiment, we end up with this moment where students are diving into what the nature of literature is and literary language, and then these huge questions. And this for me is the best part, because taking a step back and then reapproaching this assignment, I realized that the basic questions that we start with in sort of literary studies end up having profound effects in this context. When you start a story and you say, okay, who wrote this? Who's the intended audience? Why was it written? These questions don't have good answers, easy answers in this context. Who wrote this? Well, nobody. An LLM isn't a who. Who is the intended audience? Well, I don't know. It algorithmically imagines an audience. What are they trying to communicate? Well, nothing. They don't have any intent. And all of a sudden, students feel this, and they're really ready to dive into these questions. And they come out with these perspectives from this exploration of the intersection of technology and identity, like saying, okay, what is being erased here? What is being foregrounded? They notice, for example, in comparison, that the AI stories tend to be almost utopian in their version of what future tech looks like. The AI becoming sentient in those stories are delighted with this wonderful future, whereas the human story is quite dark and addresses the complications there. So it has been an unexpected and very rewarding experience to have the students engage this in that way. And I think that's what I have.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much. And that's a pretty powerful observation that you had. That's amazing. I would like to go move on. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will get to questions and answers at the end. But next up is Wes Bethel.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking time to come to this discussion about Gen AI and education. So let's see, I'm part of the computer science faculty at San Francisco State. I also have a joint appointment with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I've been at San Francisco State for a couple of years. Before that, I was a senior computer scientist at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and helped shape research program in high performance data intensive scientific computing. And part of my motivation for coming to San Francisco State is to help train the next generation of scientists and engineers. So the three things that I wanted to talk about today are how we're using AI in an applied computational science research project. I'm going to show you a demo, right? So I want to show you the technology in action. And so fingers crossed that there's no disaster. And then I want to talk a little bit about Gen AI in our department. Good. So the science problem is a fusion energy sciences problem. And in fusion energy sciences, a fusion reactor consists of this donut-shaped device called a tokamak, in which they ignite a plasma. And so the plasma burns at 1,000,000 degrees, and the plasma is controlled by magnets. And so one of the objectives is to have a nice, well-behaved plasma, because if the thing goes crazy, 1,000,000 degrees is going to burn the wall of the tokamak, right? It'll melt the device. And so one of the objectives is to be able to have a digital twin that models certain aspects of the plasma in real time. But the problem is that these codes, these physics codes, are very computationally expensive, even on supercomputers. They can take anywhere from tens of minutes to tens of hours to run. So the code itself is not viable for use in real-time controls. So a project that we started a few years ago while I was still at LBL full-time was to generate AI-based surrogates. So these AI-based surrogates are chunks of code that are an AI model that mimics what the physics code does. And so we had some success in doing that. They reduced the runtime of the physics codes from, hours or days down to, milliseconds. And so this is actually a viable approach for use in real-time experimental control. However, there was a lengthy development time. It took a team of, 5 or 6 people, half physicists, half computer science people. Yeah, we worked on this for like 2.5 to 3 years before we got some results. And so the current problem that we're looking at is, can we use AI to generate AI? That's the key problem that we're trying to solve. And so I have a sub-award now from MIT, who are some of the partners on the project, to look at this very question. And I have a team of students who I've shown here. We're looking on this. And so the approach is to leverage GitHub's Copilot, which you're going to see in action, to generate models and compare model accuracy with previous work. So let's see. I'm going to the results so far. Took the original team, more than 2 years to come up with 3 different methods, and the current approach that we're taking using AI to generate AI, in a couple of months, we have the same 3 methods producing better model accuracy, but we're not quite done yet. And some of the successes here, we can generate code quickly, which is nice, but there's a ton of shortcomings, most notable of which is that there's deep understanding required of both the data, the computational problem space, as well as the code that's actually being generated. So it's not a simple turnkey process. So all right, so fingers crossed. Here we go. This is where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. So let's see here. Sorry, bear with me for a second. Okay, so this is Visual Studio Code, which is a code development environment that a lot of students like to use. And basically what I'm going to do, I have some pre-prepared prompts here. I'm asking Copilot to generate a sampling of a function, and I'm defining the range of the function. And so I enter this, and Copilot, oh good, it's actually working. It generates code. And I'll say, sure, I'll accept that code. And now I'm going to run it. Oh, and I asked this code to generate a plot for me. So I'm starting up the Python kernel that is behind this Jupyter notebook. And we'll give it a second to do its thing. Okay, so it's running and it produces a plot for me. Okay, so that's a pretty good start. So now this just shows you sort of first light. So let's take the next step in what we want to do here. Let's see. So now I'm asking Copilot to create a data set consisting of a random sampling of independent variables and then to produce the corresponding dependent variables, in this case, a specific function. And so Copilot's going to generate some code for me. And even if you haven't, oh, and I asked it to just print out the data set. Even if you're not familiar with code, this is pretty compact code. So from a computer science perspective, you know, this is not too bad. But I'm giving it a very specific sort of statement. And here it's printing out this data set, and to a first order, you know, it looks okay. So now what I want to do is create a plot of this data. The direction that I'm going with this is I'm actually going to ask Copilot to build an AI model, a regressor model, to predict this particular data. So now I'm asking it to create a scatter plot of this data so that you can see what it looks like. And this is kind of stupid. It's creating a complete new data set containing what we just printed. So this is the AI being not very smart here. Okay, so here's what a scatter plot of that data looks like. And so let's see, I have like 3 more prompts that I'm going to issue. They get a little bit more complicated. Oops. So now I'm asking Copilot to generate a random forest regressor, which is a simple AI model that's going to predict the Y values given the X values. And so it thinks for a minute. Let's see what happens. And today it's not actually successfully generating the code. So let me switch over here. This is what I did yesterday. I was afraid something like this might happen. I created the scatter plot of the data. The prompt that I just entered, Copilot generated this code yesterday. I don't know why it's not generating it today. And when I evaluate the model efficacy using mean squared error, I get this, you know, nice low value. I'm not going to continue on with the prompt in the other notebook because, as luck would have it with demos, things go wrong. And so something went wrong here. I asked Copilot to compare the predicted values with the ground truth. And so here you see the result of that. And then I asked Copilot to show me the ground truth and the predictions along with a depiction of the function that I had to begin with. And so that's what the result was. So let me stop with Copilot. There's always some risk in doing live demos, and here we see, oops, hang on a second. There we go. Okay, so let's reflect on the results from, what I've just showed you, as well as from the project as a whole. And so, one question is, does it improve productivity? And so what we found is that Copilot can quickly generate code from prompts, which is nice. The more specific the prompt, the better the code that you got. And one pleasant surprise is that, not only does it generate code, but it'll also maybe make a suggestion in terms of, have you thought about looking at this other topic, right? Which has actually been pretty helpful. Does it produce better code than humans? For me personally, as a lifelong coder, sometimes it's easier for me just to write the code than it is to try and figure out how to describe in English what I want the code to do. It does save time looking at details in manuals and stuff, but sometimes its information is out of date, right? So Copilot is trained on a corpus of information, which was a snapshot of the past. And, current software has evolved and it's different than what Copilot's referencing. So in terms of Gen AI in the computer science department at San Francisco State, I've highlighted this quote down here at the bottom of the slide. So Jensen Huang is the CEO of NVIDIA. And in an article in February, he said, the future of a career as a coder is dead. And this freaked everybody out, because that's why many computer science students are computer science students. They want to learn how to code so that they can get a job. And if an industry leader is saying the future's dead, this is a real wake-up call here. So I have a picture here in the upper right, a cartoon of the Star Trek Borg, and their motto is resistance is futile. And so, Gen AI is part of the future, and in the CS department, we're actually embracing it. We're trying to figure out how to make good pedagogical use of it. It's used in the classroom, it's used for assignments, and we feel that it's important to teach people how to use it so that they're competitive in the job market, but also so that they understand the ethical considerations. In fact, one of our master's programs is in ethical AI. So here's a list of resources. I can share the slides and you can go check this stuff out. Copilot is free for educators and students. Interestingly, there was a recent article from last month in the Communications of ACM in which they looked at measuring Copilot's impact on productivity. This is interesting reading. And from the computer science education community, there have been recent papers looking at how Copilot is used in the computer science curriculum. And so one of the findings from this Denny paper here is that when applied to CS1 and CS2 problems, so first year and second year computer science problems, Copilot produces the wrong answer about half the time. And so you saw evidence of that today. I gave a very specific prompt and Copilot didn't actually generate the code. So, this happens. So I'm happy to share these slides and hopefully you can make good use of it. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Vez. Thank you again for that demo. There are a bunch of questions in the chat. We'll get to them, but maybe you can take a look. We'll transition to our next speaker. Deborah Glass, did you make it? Yes. Oh, did she?
I
Jennifer?
don't think so. I don't see her. I sent her an email about 10 minutes ago, so maybe she'll be able to get on before this portion ends.
Okay.
But we can maybe move to the next speaker and see what happens.
Yeah. Then Chenwei and Ikwan, please take it away.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Yi Kwan. I teach creativity and entrepreneurship in International Business Department. Chen Wei teaches leadership and influence skills in management. Today, we are very excited to share with you a pilot study of a mini grant proposal. Our goal of this proposal aligns with what Jennifer mentioned earlier this morning, that we want to teach students to use AI to empower and assist their learning, but not to replace their learning. To overcome the risk of over-relying on AI to substitute student learning, we implement an experiential learning approach in our classes. In both of our classes, students are required to actively engage and take on various roles to complete either an assignment or a term project. So this is a year-long project. In phase 1, within Chenwei's leadership class, students use AI to practice giving feedback for leadership communication. In the following semester, our phase 2, in my class, students will use AI to enhance their role-play entrepreneur skills. They take on 3 distinct roles: the leader, the entrepreneur, and the venture capitalist in a simulated Shark Tank competition event. And we are going to present our work at the International Management and Organization Behavior Teaching Society Conference at Singapore this June. And now I would like to hand it over to Qian Wei. She will explain in detail of our pilot study.
Thank you so much, Ikwan. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm Associate Professor of Management from Lam Family College of Business. I want to mention this mini project, Ikwan and I, we collaborate together, was supported by Lam Larson, the Emerging Technology Initiative, and we really appreciate their support. So this semester, we kind of, explored how we can use generative AI to enhance the way we teach and refine leadership skills. I'm teaching leadership and HRs to both undergraduate and graduate students. Management 648, it's up-level division classes for senior management students. The purpose of this class is to kind of help develop crucial leadership and influence skills. The course is based on the idea that everyone has, some leadership potentials. It looks at leadership from both leaders and followers' perspectives and viewpoints, giving students a well-rounded understanding of the challenges and opportunities involved in the leading process. So when I'm teaching this leadership class, we kind of used a lot of practical experiential activities throughout the semester that help, develop their leadership skills and styles. One of the main leadership skills we kind of focused on throughout the semester is the feedback giving and the receiving, because we kind of feel like feedback is crucial, in leadership. It's not just about correcting and directing behaviors. It's more about building communications and foster, trust and growth in the leading process. So we also know leaders, majority of the responsibility for leaders is give and receive feedback as a routine part of their daily activities. So in the leadership research, we kind of categorize feedback into 3 different types here: appreciation, coaching, and evaluation. Each type serve as a purpose from motivating employees and engaging, their work, and also expanding their skills or aligning their performance, with the organization standards. And appreciation type, we are all very familiar with this type. It's the purpose of appreciation is to motivate, encourage, and acknowledge. And this type of feedback, kind of help employees feel valued or reassured that their work and their efforts matters. But we do have some challenges as a leader, by giving this type of feedback in the workplace, especially, you need to make sure to make it effective, you need to make sure, this type of feedback need to be very specific, authentic, and also tailored to the value and needs of the receivers. We, as managers and leaders, sometimes kind of, forget, how important this type of feedback is. And the second type of, feedback we usually talk a lot about in class is a coaching type. The coaching type, actually, this type is the majority type of feedback, every leaders need to give in their daily routines. The purpose of this type is to make sure, employees kind of engage, in their work and enable improvement through growth, learning, and change. So this type of feedback can help employees kind of improve performance or increase knowledge, or, sharpen their skills, abilities, and but the challenges for this type of feedback is like it takes time for leaders to kind of to kind of like to think about like, okay, how am I gonna give this type of feedback? It takes time, it takes skills, it also takes very thoughtful plannings. It requires leader to have a deeper understanding, efforts, commitment on what kind of contributions, employees has added to the team. And also it's fairly easy for leaders to kind of fall into the trap of believing like this type of, coaching feedback, because it will sometimes sounds very like another type of feedback we're going to talk about here, evaluation. And if leaders, coaching type of feedback is too generic or not actionable enough, and employees might feel disencouraged. And also sometimes, if you feel kind of focus too much on the negative aspect of coaching and, neglect the positive side, it also will make employees less likely to perceive. And of course, there's another type of feedback, evaluation. And this type of feedback, the purpose of this type of feedback is to determine like where you stand. So evaluation type of feedback helps align expectations, clarify consequences, and inform like decision making. So like grades, usually, performance assessment and rankings, acceptance letters or rejection letters, those type of feedback are all belonging to evaluation type of feedback. And for this type of feedback to be effective, it also has challenge because essentially it's a comparison, and you compare one employee's performance against another employee's or a particular set of standards. So so in the workplace, we know like we all need 3 different types of feedback, but sometimes, leaders tend to kind of mix different types of feedback together in the workplace. And those kind of mix will make employees sometimes less likely to receive your feedback. Why? Because sometimes in some situations, some employees are looking for appreciation type of feedback. They don't want your guidance at this moment. They just want you to say thank you, but you tend to put on a coaching hat. They were like, what's going on here, right? Like, and sometimes employees are looking for evaluation types of feedback, asking like leaders, managers to give them like where they are, like, how good, like their work is. But leaders, tend not to give this type of feedback. So employees can feel super kind of confused. So with that being said, like teaching students effective leadership, especially feedback giving and receiving skills is quite challenging too, because, we know like class time, we have very limited time in class, like how are we gonna give, students, time to practice, to improve, to engage in those kind of feedback conversation. I constantly, tell students like, my class is not like a magic, and you will not suddenly become an excellent leader after this class. It all depends, like how much time you put into practicing all the skills we covered in class. And especially for feedback giving, students may feel uncomfortable, intimidated by the prospect of providing feedback. Even, I give them role-playing exercises. A lot of students kind of fear the confrontation. They kind of feel like, oh, I don't want to hurt, my partner's feelings. I don't want to sound too like aggressive in this conversation. And they may also, struggle to provide feedback in a like tactful way, especially, you know, when addressing very, very sensitive type of, you know, issues, and they are afraid, like, you know, their partners will become very, very defensive, right? Like, and also a lot of students, you know, especially for undergraduate student classes, a lot of them, they might not have a lot of experiences in giving feedback as a manager, so they don't know what to say. Like they don't know how to frame the issues, what kind of, you know, like words are appropriate for them to use to address this particular issues. And also students kind of constantly mention like they need multiple opportunities to practice it. But sometimes, you know, our in-class experiential exercise may not give them enough time. And they you know, with that being said, you know, like Ikwan and I, we kind of sit down together like, oh, maybe, you know, ChatGPT can play a role here. And especially, you know, like in the prompt engineering world, ChatGPT has like a persona prompts. You can ask a ChatGPT to act, you know, as a coach, act as a manager or employees, or basically anybody, you know, to kind of engage conversation with you. So that's with that being said, yeah.
Qingwei, we have probably only like 2-3 minutes left.
Oh, sorry about that. I think I gave too much background information here. So the project you know, we give to students is the Excalibur project case, and in this case we have you know, like managers and employees here, and Sebastian is the manager, Diane is the employee, and in this case. I want to do a quick summary here since we don't have a lot of time. So for this case, you know, Sebastian is a very ambitious, like managers on a fast track, you know, managerial positions. And then Diane is also a very hardworking employees. But you know, like in these situations, like Diane is looking for promotion, and it's like a rapid promotion because she thinks, you know, she did a really good job in the Excalibur project. But according to Sebastian, you know, he has some different thoughts and perceptions. He kind of feel like, yes, Diane did contribute to the project, however, and she is you know, lacking like in leadership skills, especially, you know, like a little bit like you know, like a micromanaging when she was leading the team. So with this as a, you know, background, like I ask students to do the role play, like one group of students, one students will play like, you know, the Diane, and another one will play the Sebastian. And we have many different teams, you know, in the class to do the feedback conversation. And why they prepare for this, you know, why they prepare for this feedback conversations, I ask students like what kind of challenges they would anticipate, you know, when they engage in those conversations. And here are some of their raw data. They kind of really feel like, oh my goodness, you know, seems like, you know, like Sebastian can sometimes be really direct and harsh regarding, you know, his negative feedback, because Diane kind of thinks Sebastian is focused too much on negative side of her performance. And some students who play Sebastian, they kind of anticipate, wow, you know, Diane will not take the feedback well. She's gonna become super, you know, defensive, because Diane is a hard worker, but you know, in this feedback conversation, Sebastian tends to play, you know, play like a coach, like trying to, you know, like coach Diane to improve certain performance for her. So those are all the challenges they expect. And but anyway, you know, I ask all of them to write down the feedback conversation when they are engaging, you know, with their partners. And here are some of their original write-up. And after reading all, you know, like students' assignments, I was like, wait a minute, it seems like, you know, both sides tend to forget about what kind of goals, what kind of perspectives, you know, they originally have about others. For example, some students, you know, who play Sebastian, they kind of like forget about it, like, you know, they have concerns about Diane's leadership skills. You know, they just give whatever Diane asked. And, you know, Diane asked for a promotion and they were like, okay, I will give you that. And, you know, like, but some students who play Diane, you know, they also kind of not sure what to do. And they they are not like, like assertive enough to stand on the ground telling Sebastian like, okay, I did contribute a lot and it's not fair, for you to, say all those kind of coaching related feedback to me. So students kind of tend to like, oh, like they basically, a majority of the feedback conversations I read, they didn't achieve their original goals. They tend to, like kind of confused or not sure what to say next. So with that being said, we in class, I kind of train students, like how to engage with, like the ChatGPT first. And I give them, like those examples of prompts, like how they can, interact with ChatGPT to help them prepare with all those different responses Diane might have. So here I want to share with you a quick process how, like I showed in the class. So we ask students to use any, chat box they may have. It does not necessarily need to be ChatGPT. So we kind of, ask students to kind of ask ChatGPT to act as a manager if they are employee, if they are playing Diane's role. They can also ask, ChatGPT to play like Sebastian's role if they are Diane, and ask ChatGPT to play Sebastian's like Diane's role if they are Sebastian. So ChatGPT actually, provide them like kind of very, very interesting type of feedback conversation or dialogues here. And they, like first I ask them to kind of upload the case there to summarize the case. And then also, like based on, this case and what kind of, how could you simulate a conversation where, I meant well, but Diane gets really defensive and frustrated during the feedback conversation. Can you simulate a dialogue showing me, what I should say if Diane gets defensive and not, like not open to feedback? And then, ChatGPT would give them all those kind of feedback. And what about like, what if, like Diane insists like she needs to get that promotion, but I think she's not ready. And also, like students can ask ChatGPT to kind of do the role play. Like, what if Diane threatens to quit the job? If Sebastian, didn't give her the promotion she asked for. So all kinds of different, like scenarios they can think of. And finally, of course, I also encourage students to ask ChatGPT, like simulate a conversation dialogue between Sebastian and Diane that goes well and solve each party's concern, right? Like what are some like things you can say to make sure, solve each party's concern here. And students were having fun. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but you have 30 seconds to finish up.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, final slides here. And we also collected some, student comments here. Yeah. And after, playing, with ChatGPT, so I asked them to write up the feedback conversation again and see, whether or not they have better ideas, are more prepared to engage in those kind of feedback conversation. Here are some student comments. Yeah, they mentioned like ChatGPT did give them, some other perspectives and kind of help them, become more prepared for this kind of exercise. And I actually have one student, he shared like, oh my goodness, like he's like, I have a very, very similar conversations I need to, do like next week in my workplace. And that's great. And he's like, I'm gonna, ask a ChatGPT to role play this with me before he deliver the feedback to his team members. Thank you so much. Sorry for, like going over time.
Thank you so much, Chinwei and Ikwan. I know Deborah is here, but I'll give her a little bit of time to settle. But let's go to Salah Hamdoun. Salah, I think I see you. Yes. Go ahead, Salah.
Hi everyone, just one moment to set this up. It's always, I think that should be, yeah. you can, no, you can see my,
Yes, we can see.
okay, let me do this. Right there. This one I need. There you go. You can see my screen, I suppose.
Yes. we
Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Salah Hamdoun. I am a PhD candidate in Innovation and Global Development at Arizona State University. I am also this year's SDS Hub Fellow at San Francisco State University. The SDS Hub Fellow, SDS Hub is basically a collective of academics and students coming together to talk about the social values of technology, what it means for the future, and that could be anything from healthcare to education, right? So and finance, and so we really talk about what are the implications? Basically, the same discussion that we're having here today on a continuous basis. So it's a great resource, great couple of people. If you are interested, let me know. I can connect you or. Otherwise, let me see. Let me start off. A lot of great things have already been said this morning, so I'm very happy that I can skip over half of my presentation. It's great. But let's take a step back perhaps I mean, I'll share with you how my research is also informing my my teaching. Let me just get my notes here. Yeah. Yeah, so my work is focused on risk in development. I look at ways in which development can approach economic growth, but look at economic growth as with embedded risk, right? So as we are growing, we are also creating all these new opportunities, but they come with they return with some devastating effects sometimes if we don't pay attention. This is an example, right? So on the left, you have a great cloud seeding program that's basically not only in Dubai, but also different places around the world. But in combination with climate change, we are getting other kinds of results, these unintended consequences. So this is the kind of work that I'm looking at, really presenting the evidence that there is a relationship between the risk and the economic growth so that we can actually start paying attention to that. Now, the story of risk is also about the perception of risk and a concentrated power of a dominating approach to risk in society that we should be able to change, but it's quite often very difficult. But it's also important to look at the risk perception, the way that people experience new technologies, because it's basically a moment of interaction between the technology and the individual. Let me just. So I look here at two different things. I look at AI in education, for example, but also other kinds of technologies as a moment of disembedding, the moment that we are looking at our old practices in a new setting, and we really don't know what we have to do, what we can do with our practices. And what you see often is that people trying to figure out what it means for their own future, their own position, their own industry. We're looking at universities now, really starting to think, how can we better implement AI? And I am not seeing, and I want to see you because, anyways, that's fine. Yeah, so how we can better implement the idea of AI in our educational system. So first, really the acknowledgement that we are part of a moving society, and this is part of it. So this really uncomfortable feeling is often we often respond by these kind of events, really talking to each other, really trying to understand how to move forward, taking a step back, putting a foot on the brake, and really trying to understand what is this new technology, what is it going to bring us. And there's the disembedding part. Now, there's also the re-embedding part, the way in which we're trying to come back to a kind of a normal situation, right? We're all looking forward to ways of looking at using AI. That's the other part. We're going and we're constantly with innovation, we're going between disembedding and re-embedding. Whether that's innovation or people migrating, for example, it's the same thing, moving to cities. All of it is about the new experience and trying to find a foot on the ground, which is often very difficult. There are three things that we're doing when it comes to this embedding. We are looking at the existing practices, as we mentioned. We're looking at views, learning, and we're also looking at relationships. So how can we use relationships to cut back into the place where we want? And in student life, that means meeting up, using Zoom for old practices such as student-led organizing events, where we use social media, but nowadays also use AI to generate many other things. But all of that is part of our process of getting back into a state of where we want to be. These three are difficult, though. They're not equally distributed. People are not having equally chances to look at these three elements and work towards a new situation where it can feel more in line with what society wants. And something that most of you actually already mentioned, how can we get students back to a situation where it can be useful for them, but also to understand our value in society for these students. I am running through the slides very quickly, but it's fine. So what does that mean for equality? My understanding is that we can look at this embedding. We can look at how we are moving away from our old practice, our old technologies, and having to start reevaluating our old practices, our ways of teaching, our ways of evaluating work, questions such as plagiarism. But what about the equality? Now, my suggestion is that we should be looking at re-embedding, the process of re-embedding. And I'm so happy that I already heard a lot of people are already thinking about, well, it's here, it's not going anywhere. We have to do something about that, which is true. The acknowledging that this is going to have a profound impact and transform the way we live and work, and just do everything and anything else in our ordinary life. I think that's important. But we have to look at the re-embedding part specifically because of the experience of people. As I mentioned earlier, my work is really focused on trying to understand the risk perception. And for one reason is to understand what kind of world we want to shape. Having people involved in that discussion is important. Knowing what they want to learn, knowing how they are able to use their new skills, new ways of doing in the career paths or in their academic journey. But the re-embedding is something that universities will probably have a little bit of difficulty with, because it demands looking at the experience from the user and perhaps changing the role of the university as becoming even a more a facilitator instead of a coordinator in a way of organizing future careers, but really listening and understanding what people see in our new technologies. I said like the way, so staying disconnected is really, so the formula of this embedding is basically also means that whoever is in power, whoever is already, or who already occupies position in society that allows to understand and recognize opportunities, those will probably be okay. It is people who have difficulties trying to understand or reach out to the opportunities that are there right now that we have to be concerned about, and be concerned about in a way that allows us to rethink this abstract way of in the educational system, really to accommodate them and match the real world issues with the teaching that we're doing today. And I'm so happy to hear all of these amazing, innovative solutions. The way I use that in my own teaching, I teach a class in the summer. It's a asynchronous class called Innovation in Global Development, is by doing basically two things: trying to situate this technology, trying to situate the people that are using the technology in a larger space, right? So it is. I always look at, for example, future events, future large events, global events, and this year I've chosen the FIFA 2030 World Cup to explain to students this is a pathway that some of some have chosen. What do you think about that? Can you take different positions on that? Things that we wouldn't really think about as being driven by AI, but are becoming more and more important. So the first part is like understand what is the development of AI that we're talking about, just really to lift people up and trying to see the overall map of that, right? And then I asked them to use ChatGPT, but as others have mentioned as well, focus on, I basically explained to them the ethics, the limitations, on all the other considerations for them to present a report or present an analysis that is about AI in development, and really to do both things. Now, with that, I want to train them to become not only consumers but also producers of directions in which we want to take AI, which again comes back to the overall idea of technology, is that we are producing consumers, but I also think it's important for students to be informed enough to also be part in the decision making and the discussion about AI in the future. That's why I also wanted to note the FIFA World Cup. Is it something we don't even think about yet? It is going to become more and more important in how, for example, sports use AI and other fields use AI, for students really to be prepared and not think about it as an opportunity that they cannot reach. I think that's all I got now, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Salah. That was 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So our last presenter is Deborah Glass. Deborah, please take it away.
Okay, great. And thanks for having me. And I'm kind of excited to present to you. So I'm presenting from the design department. I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the uses of AI in some of our design studio classes. And specifically, I want to focus on our anxiety over copying with AI. And I'm going to look at a few examples from the past, kind of informing my thinking about AI right now. So the robots are coming. Robots are here. A lot of us in these visual fields are super anxious about what these automated tools are going to mean for using our original work for AI training and image generation. For us in this field, a lot of these AI tools are already integrated in the software that we're using. So we get these persistent pop-ups in Photoshop and in Illustrator. Use our generative tool, use our generative tool. We've got things like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion being used for image generation. It's really interesting to me that just 12 months ago, you would have these 12-toed, three-eye monster puppies that would be created using these image generation tools. And now here we are a year later, and we get the brightest-eyed, shiniest furred little puppies that have this hyper-real quality. And just watching that transformation has been it's been fascinating, it's been exciting, it's been terrifying all at the same time. I want to kind of talk about some of our premises as we're assessing AI. And one of the things about AI technology and the anxiety that it creates is based on this idea that originality is always good and copying is always bad. And those are ideas that we have taken on almost like they're a priori ideals for us. At the same time, I'm really looking at where those premises came from, and I'm looking at the evolution of technology and kind of how we came to the ideas that are creating our anxieties around AI today. And one of those starts with the printing press. So when we get the printing press back in 1440, this is the first time that we can make multiples. And that also means that that's the first time that people can make money as authors, because now they can sell their books. So really, like, all of our notions of originality come from the fact that we could copy. And there's this kind of irony in the fact that originality becomes valuable when we can make copies. It doesn't exist before that. I put my little picture of the scribe down here, right? And asked, do you remember this guy? Nobody does. And that's because there was no authorship when we were making books like this, because we were making single one-offs. A lot of what we think about copying has to do with the way copyright law has been formed. So way back in the 1500s, Albrecht Dürer goes to court to sue his competitor, Marcantonio Raimondi, who is making copies of his prints. And he says, this guy's stealing money straight from my pocket. You have to do something about this. You have to keep him from making copies of my work. And the courts were like, look, we get it, but we don't want to do that because that's going to slow down commerce. That's going to slow down the dissemination of ideas. But we have a deal for you, Dürer. You can't have copyright over your visual work, but you can have copyright over your signature. And so you'll notice on all of Dürer's work, you've got this little monogram, this little AD. And that's what the courts granted copyright over. So even in terms of our community standards and our laws, images have never really been protected. We always defer to how can we make money? How can we disseminate ideas? Oops. Another little piece of technology that I think is really informative for us is the camera obscura. This is basically a pinhole camera. You could reflect images into a large box or a small box, and you could trace them off and make drawings and paintings this way. We've always really celebrated the genius of the Renaissance painters. Again, we've credited them with being original, and we really still aspire to that in today's world. But really in recent years, probably in the last 15 or 20 years, a lot of people have been reverse engineering those Renaissance paintings, and they've really come to the conclusion that that really precise math, that really accurate composition that emerged during that time is also a technological innovation. And that those folks were using those camera obscuras to recreate those images. It was a form of copying. A lot of the anxieties that we have about copying today were present at that point too, because people knew the value of, again, authorship or originality. So they would hide the fact that they use this technology. They would also hide it because they didn't want to reveal their trade secrets. They didn't want to give up their profits. So I think all of these things are really instructive for us as we think about our own anxieties today about using AI to make images. So really what I'm asking all of us to do is to kind of check our premises. Why do we believe the things that we believe? And I wanted to jump right into some of the things that we're doing in class. So one of the ways that these AI tools are really great for us as designers is we can use them for brainstorming and research. And I'm just giving you a couple of scenarios of current student work. Students right now are making parody or pastiche movie posters in the advanced graphic design class. This was some work that was done in yesterday's class. I have a student who is doing the movie Akira, but they want to do it in a photo montage style of the movie Blade Runner. So they were just running some generative AI to test out some compositions, and then they'll use these compositions as reference as they're building out their poster. I think that's a great use of AI. Same thing can be applied checking out genre and style. So again, these are images that people were generating in class. Yesterday, we've got an example of film noir. We've got The Passion of the Christ recast as a war epic. We've got the movie Jackass recast in the horror genre. Again, really great way to iterate, to brainstorm, to do a little image research, to think about how you're going to put that poster together in our class. the end of the day, designers copy. It's actually really valuable for us to copy. At the student level, even as a practitioner, we're always taking things apart and putting them back together. And that's how we learn how something's made. It's also a way for us to create familiarity and resonance, right? I even saw, a few people smiled a little bit when they were seeing these things. I think you were smiling because you've seen these things before, but it's fun to see them recast in a new light like this. So as designers, we're always playing to that resonance and that familiarity. And the final thing I wanted to say is we always have to copy because it tells you how to use our content. It tells us how to use our artifacts, right? I'm not going to put a red button on a vacuum cleaner to mean go, because you all know that red means stop. So I'm going to copy those precedents that have come before me, and I'm going to make that button green so you know how to turn on that vacuum cleaner that I just designed for you. So I'm really making the case that, particularly in this field, but this probably cross applies to all fields in some way or another, we're always copying. So one of the things that I'm really thinking about is how do we set some guardrails in the classroom? Because I have a lot of anxiety about the cynical role or cynical players who are using AI, who might be trying to deceive people, or there might just be that kind of laziness of bad thinking that happens when you use these tools without a lot of care. At the same time, I think that there are plenty of ways that we can use these things. So one of the things we're doing in the classroom is defining some of our community standards, right? What is good use? Research, brainstorming, great use of AI. Creating a one-off asset, really great use of AI. AI is so weird right now because it's not really regulated in a universal way. But even with the AI tools, depending on what tools you're using, some of them actually have their own guardrails built in. So some of them don't let you use copyrighted materials. Some of them don't let you use, I don't know, violent content or highly sexualized content. And so that's the other thing, is I'm kind of trying to guide students towards using tools that are already setting some community standards that we can mirror back. And then finally, just always cite your sources. Right? This is something that I say to students all the time. There's a lot of content that's available for you to use. You just need to go through the right process of documenting those sources and getting permission to use those sources. So I thought I'd end by showing you some of the posters that people have completed in the last 2 semesters while I've been letting them use AI. So AI has been optional on these projects. You've got 3 examples here that I think are excellent use of AI as an image generation tool. In this first example, we've got a mashup of the La La Land poster and Star Wars. In the background, you see some conventional Photoshop compositing using stock images. And then you've got our little, sorry, I'm getting Carrie Fisher, Mark Hamill, what are their character names? Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker, AI generated. Here again, photo compositing in the background for Sunny with a Chance of Windfalls, AI generated assets that have been placed into the composition. And then finally here, this is largely photo compositing. This is based on that meme that there's nothing else to do in the Fast and Furious franchise but pair them up with the Marvel figures. So these figures here have been done as AI figures so that we could fit them into that photo montage. Really great use of AI. And then the final thing I was going to say is we also have plenty of students who try to use AI, find out it doesn't really work for their projects, and really kind of double down on their craft. So these are all examples of, the first is Procreate, so everything is hand illustrated. The second is an example of people taking photographs using toys that they collected. And the third example is really just conventional layout design